Hi, and it's so nice to see everyone again virtually. You're on Music and Chat with Shueh-li Ong, and it's a good morning from me to you in Singapore. Please say hi in the live chat and let us know where you're tuning in from. Don't be backward and coming forward. We're in phase one of Singapore's post-lockdown. Some things have changed. Recreational areas have opened, although constrained by the number of people present at one spot and social distancing. Anyway, please remember to put your questions in a live chat and I shall address them as the stream moves along. Please say hi when you get here. Hi, Sam. It's always good to see you, Sam. I'm going to plonk you down there. Sam reminded me last week during post-stream that I had a question about you with regards to Somewhere Over the Rainbow and the Star Trek theme song. And the question was, what is common between the two? And of course, I never got to answer it. So Sam diligently went through his research and offered his suggestions, and we both finally came to the conclusion that the only best answer could be that they're both songs from movies. Let us know if you have any other suggestion to offer. Thanks, Sam, again for your hard work. That's Sam from Sydney, Australia. Hi, Mike. Phoenixville, yes. Pennsylvania. Mike Flavin missed us last week. You missed a great stream, Mike. We missed you too, but glad to see you back today. Where is everyone else hiding? I see some bodies virtually there. I see that as a number 8. No one else is game to come up and say hi and let us know where you're from. That's A-okay. So anyway, I want to get the stream moving a bit because our guest is accustomed to hitting the sack around this time, his time on the East Coast, and getting up ultra early. When I say early, I mean, 2 a.m. it seems. So we are keeping him from his dreams where all his ideas are created. So it seems with a lot of creative people, our ideas come from when we are in what's a good phrase to describe it? When we're not distracted by daily rituals, but we have the freedom to be inspired while we're resting. So okay, I did a few streams ago offer to play you some of my songs. Someone asked me whether moving to Nashville did inspire me or offer some ideas as to how I approached writing my music. And I did say that I am a songwriter as well. I don't know, I'm so accustomed to doing these air quotes, but that's out of humility. I like to think that I feel awkward saying it, so I have to do this. My awkwardness and admitting that I do something, I have to do this. Don't know how many of you succumb to this behavior, but if you see me do that, it's because I'm being apologetic that I do it. Hi, Mix and Linda. Yes, coffee. Bring us some coffee. Cheers. I got my mug of water. So, all right, without further ado, I am going to sing you one of my songs, which is from my 4th album, which I wrote and released in Nashville. And following that, it's the instrumental accompaniment to the song. The song is called A Working Title, and it's describing a dysfunctional relationship. Popular topic. But it's allowed me to observe people and condense it into lyrics for a song. And the instrumental accompaniment is called A Working Title, da capo, where I get a chance to use my theremin to emote a little bit. So without further ado, I shall bring on my theremin cam so that you can see me play theremin and piano at the same time. What piano? Synthesizer. But it's got electric piano sounds. So here we go.
Then you notice that you
charged into your mind. Our sentence is delivered, guilty as charged of trying to steal a working title. Our sentence is delivered, guilty as charged of trying to steal a working title. When teardrops fall, I catch my breath. My needs are important too, but so are you. I got to think of happy times, forgetting that you crossed the line. Isn't such a crime. Then you wonder why you miss me each time we say goodbye. Our sentence is delivered, guilty as charged of trying to steal a working title. Our sentence is delivered, guilty as charged of trying to steal a working title. Thanks, Mike. I had to wrestle with the equipment a bit to get the right frame back, the right cam. This is the Shueh-li cam versus the theremin cam. But thanks, Mike, for your compliment. So, also on my fourth album, if you have not gone to check it out yet on shueh-li-ong.bandcamp.com, is my cover of Michael Jackson's Thriller. And I want to show you a quick clip because in this clip, our guest today appears for a short while.
And though you fight to stay alive, your body starts to shiver. For no mere mortal can resist the evil of the Thriller.
There you go, special guest today, Jeff Bell. Before I talk about him, greetings from Doylestown, Pennsylvania. Hi, Bill, you missed, yes, my singing. Don. Well, it's a good thing you can come back and watch it later or go to my Bandcamp store and check it out. All right, so on to more exciting stuff than my singing. Thank you for your compliments, though, is this. Oh, hi, Mike. Oh, yes. Mike, Eugene, Oregon, has heard me sing several times. I think Mike got together a little gig for me in New Zealand when he was there quite a few years ago. Ha ha. Oh dear, now there's this cross chat going on between Mike and Bill again. Oh no, that was a different Mike previously. All these Mikes. If you recall, I made an anecdote about my mom saying I have quite a few friends called Michael. Yes, Michael seems to be a common name. Don't you think? All Mikes, hands up. Okay, so moving on. Voiceover talent has many tricks under their belt so that they can deliver on point. Can they be believable? Do they seem trustworthy? Do you feel like they can be your mate, your buddy, your bud? Or should they be the opposite? Are they trying to scare you away from whatever it is they're referring to? Well, I want to show you a demo reel of our guest, one of a couple of demo reels.
It's a little after 6 o'clock. I'm Jeff Bell. Stereo 98 rocks. KTAL-FM, Texarkana, Shreveport.
Good evening and welcome to the Night Mix on Chicago's Mix 102. I'm Jeff Bell, anxious to get your call tonight. You can reach me at 591-6800. It's Friday the 13th. Good night to stack the deck in your favor any way you can. Maybe you can get lucky in love with a dedication on the Night Mix tonight. 591-6800. That's my number till midnight. Chicago's only request and dedication show, Night Mix on Mix 102.
Yes, you have entered into the KLH time tunnel. How will you fare? Here's how it works. I've got some sound bites from your past. All you have to do is tell me what year they came from, and I will have an armload of goodies for you. Are you ready for the KLH time tunnel?
The U.S. Embassy in Tehran remains occupied by Iranian students demanding
There you go. How impressive is that? Let's bring on our guest, shall we? Jeff Bell, where are you? Calling him via Skype right now. Oh, Jeff. How impressive is that? Let's bring on our guest, shall we? Jeff Bell, where are you? Calling him via Skype right now.
Okay, got it. I think I got it to work. I'm seeing me.
Yay!
All right, let me turn down all this other stuff so I'm not distracted.
All right, everyone. Okay. Please give our guest a warm welcome, Jeff Bell.
Hi, how are you? Okay, I'm hearing voices from that side of the room. I have to fix that. All right.
It's okay. We all hear voices.
I think I'm ready now. Not the way I do, sadly. How are you?
Good, very good. And you?
It was nice to hear you sing. I don't know that I've heard you sing either.
Oh, boy.
So it was very fun.
That wasn't the best rendition, but it works.
It was good. We enjoyed it.
Thank you. So, Jeff, you've impressed us with your resume, just the radio reel alone. WTMX Chicago, WSHE Miami, KTXQ-Dallas, and KTAL Shreveport, and whoa, one more, KTAL-H Wisconsin, Milwaukee.
Milwaukee, yeah, that's where I spent the last part of my career.
So,
can you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes, thank you. What made you decide to go into radio DJ work?
Radio kind of happened to me. I kind of grew up in very rural areas. So I was born in Southern California. When I was about 7, we moved to rural Arizona. When I was 15, rural Missouri. And then right when I graduated high school, even more rural Arkansas. So there wasn't really a lot of opportunity, but there was a local newspaper, and a member of my family saw it, an ad in there and said, hey, they're looking for radio DJs. Yeah. So I went and applied, and the guy was having a little radio school, So I took the radio school, and he gave me a job because he heard my voice, obviously. And over the course of my life, I never developed any local accents. I always sort of tried not to consciously, which served me well ultimately, but it was just a sort of a conscious decision when I was 15 when we moved to Missouri to not adopt that heavy accent of that region. So when I went to the interview, I didn't have any of that baggage to overcome, and I had the big voice, right? So he gave me an opportunity, and then I just started looking for better gigs wherever I could,
Wow.
And that's how I made the radio circuit up and down the dial, as they call it.
That's perfect to our next question, because I had one for you, but one of our viewers has a similar question to mine, so okay. I'm going to pose his instead. Of course, mine was, is there a voice type for radio? And because I noticed there's this. All right, so as I was thinking of that question, this one came from someone, my friend in Sydney, Australia. And he said, he reminds me of Casey Kasem. So I noticed there's a particular voice type for radio. Is there such a thing?
I think that less so now than, I started in 1983. So when you listen to radio from that era, everybody was the big booming, disc jockey sound. And I think that it's homogenized a little bit now, and it's a little less of that, strictly that in radio. But I think there was a time when that was a thing. And I think absolutely there were times when I got the job because I had the thing, versus being the most charming cat in the world or whatever. You know what I mean? You got the thing, bro. You're going to get the gig.
But you are charming, Jeff.
Yeah, well, not every day. We all have our moments. So, but I think that it was more stereotypical then, and people expected you to have that on your radio station. So, but I think now it's more personality driven than it was always personality driven, but having the voice provided other opportunity for you inside the radio station.
So what kind
As
of
imaging voice and commercials and that sort of stuff, being more versatile.
what kind of personality do you have to have? Must you be a calm kind of a must you have that, exude that calmness, or what is it that people look for?
I being in radio to me is similar to joining the circus, because you just meet a lot of crazy people. Everyone's just like uniquely messed up people. I mean, I adore them, and I'm one of them, and I get that, but everyone's just a little bit nuts. Musicians, it's the same way with musicians are just slightly off the hook a little bit. Something's not quite right. Disc jockeys, that is revered in that business. So the crazier you are, the more success you can have in that business. Or at least during the time I was in it. I don't know what it's like. I haven't been in that business in a while, but you know what I mean? So they're kind of working off of your own ability to create madness.
When did you discover you had that eccentricity? Did you always have it, or did you have to build it up?
I started doing voices when I was, it would have been about 5 or so when the movie Oliver came out, which was the Broadway production turned into a movie. And I remember my mom took us to that. My mom and dad took me and my sister to that at a drive-in. And then she also had the soundtrack. And then the kid who was the Artful Dodger, Jack Wilde, was also on H.R. Puffin's stuff. So I started doing his Cockney accent when I was just a wee lad, if you know what I mean. So I started doing silly voices my whole life, right? So it sort of really fit in with kind of where my head was anyway, just always being interested in music and silly voices and stuff. Not so much performing on stage. I'm not into acting and movies and that kind of stuff, but silly audio, I love. I do love that,
But
So
don't you think
you
there's a
have it
little
forward and
acting in what you do?
Oh, there's a lot of it. I don't really like having cameras pointed at me. It's the
I'm
visual
sorry.
part I don't want to be in control of my body and all, hit marks and all that stuff. And there is a magic to doing silly voices that loses something when you see the face of the person doing it,
Yeah.
There's, first of all, when you're doing a crazy voice like this is, you don't want to know it's a regular guy. This is a cartoony guy. This should be an outrageous guy. You know what I mean? It shouldn't just be like a regular cat. Not that I'm a regular cat, but you know what I mean.
I do.
In our circles, I'm a regular cat. So I think that it loses something when... That was the beautiful thing about the radios, that you almost never got to see. Back in the day, you almost never got to see the person on the radio. Unless you went to an event, or something where you saw them. It was just rare. So you kind of had, and I think people still do, you put a face on the voice you hear on your radio or TV or whatever. You have to sort of, anthropomorphize them somehow. So you put a face on them. So I can't tell you the countless times I've seen that look of disappointment on someone's face when they meet me. And I'm not the guy they thought of. You know what I mean? But I mean, I have a really cool voice. I have an amazing, wildly huge voice.
Yeah.
And I don't think I look like that voice. I think you should make up your own. Yeah, but you should make up your own face for that voice on the radio. You know what I mean? You should have your own character for that, and it shouldn't ruin it by being on the dang TV. But you know, that's how we have to live these days.
So yesterday when we were catching up, you mentioned how your voice had been recognized in public places, or at least people come to you and say, "Aren't you the DJ from?" Or the.
I think everyone in radio's had that experience a time or two, and it's sort of like deja vu, like because it is an invisible thing. You know, you haven't put a face on this person, but you're in the checkout line or something and you hear this voice and you're like, that's a familiar thing to me. Now, so I did radio in the South and I did radio in the North. And I think there's a difference in the way people consume radio in the North when you're kind of locked into your cars and houses by the weather a lot more during the year. Mm-hmm. I think you develop a little closer relationship with these people on the radio because you're locked in. You know, when you're down south and it's sunny and warm and you turn up the radio and you open up the windows and it's the music that you're engaged with. When the weather's trying to kill you all the time, you know, you listen to the dude because he's got information. So you start to develop a different kind of relationship with the guys on the radio. And I think that's a kind of a fun, interesting phenomenon that occurs.
They start to feel like you are their friend. They know you so well.
I go through the same things with, you know, the people I watch regularly on YouTube now, where, especially because they'll talk about their lives and things. It's not just a broadcast. So they're more personalized broadcasts.
Yeah.
And you kind of start to feel like you know these people. And the same thing when you listen to an announcer talk about his life, you know, on the radio, or talk about a show that you were at, you know, things that you have in common, local things. You know, you start to feel an affection for them, you know.
Yeah, that's a good word, affection. That's true.
Well, I also did a thing in Milwaukee that no one really knew about. I kept getting fired, you know, I kept getting bounced out of town. So I'm like, when I got to Milwaukee, I'm like, I'm going to try and keep this gig for a minute because I'm tired of moving. So I went on this campaign to have a conversation with everybody who called my request line. Now, the year before I moved there, I spent a year doing that love song show in Chicago, so I was used to talking to people every night and sort of extracting information out of them and stuff.
Yeah.
So I thought, I'm just going to keep that up. And so I just started having conversations with everybody and trying to get them to loosen up and talk.
Yeah.
And so I did sort of double duty on connecting with that audience, you know.
Wow.
And you really become more than just an inanimate voice on the radio when you do that. You know,
that's a tough job to hold, to be like a psychoanalyst as well, at least like buddy
sometimes.
And problem solver, you know, to all
sometimes you gotta, you know, back before Wikipedia, when you had like an outlandish question, who did you call to ask? You called disc jockeys. I'll tell you who you called. I know. Because you'd be like, why would you call me with this crazy question? Like, you're the only person I don't know who will pick up a phone. So it was pretty common to just get weird trivia and stuff. Not related to the music or anything you were doing on the radio, just like totally left field stuff.
So what were your areas, where did you go to find your sources of answers? And did you have encyclopedias or dictionaries, or did you?
No, you might just ask some other guys in the studio or whatever, but no, you didn't have any special stuff. You just had the phone book and the newspaper. You might have the AP wire or something like that, so you might have, we always had the news first.
Okay.
And that include like local weather and stuff. But no, we didn't have any extra resources. Sometimes you just be like, what? Why would you think I would know that? But people would just call with crazy stuff all the time, just not related to your job. Just because you would answer the phone, they didn't know anyone else who would pick up. Weird radio phenomenon.
Do you think because you're a personality of sorts that people elevate your amount of, I wouldn't say intelligence, but knowledge?
Oh, absolutely. I think absolutely. And I think you can see that with any celebrity at almost any level of celebrity. We imbue celebrities with special powers and especially special intellectual powers. And I'll tell you something else I think happens. I think making a lot of money tricks you into thinking you're smart. We have that, that little balance we try to play in America. So we get double duty on that, where suddenly a celebrity has a lot of money and a lot of influence.
Oops. Oh, Jeff, are you still there? What happened to you? Reconnecting. Poor network connection. That's right. He'll be back in a sec. In the meantime, let me check my live chat. Mike had one to say, Mike Brunt. This reminds me of the effects of the end of silent movies on some actors. That's kind of what I broached last live stream with Kira Smith as the... let me just take Jeff off for the time being. Kira Smith was on last week talking about being a boom operator, and I did touch on that topic of how in the 90s, late 19th century, we had silent movies, and in the mid to late 20s, when we had talking movies, actors start to lose fans in throes because their voices did not match up with their appearance. You had squeaky voices that did not match with the elegant look of the lady, and so on and so forth. So yes, that is true. Bill Lynch, yeah, that is true. Yeah, as Jeff said earlier on. So I'm gonna give Jeff another call quickly. 1 second. Fingers crossed. Hope we get through to him. I wonder what's happening. Oh, Jeff. Oh, it says Jeff isn't online. I'll try again. But in the meantime... that sounds more promising. Jeff, are you there?
I am, but my phone won't turn now. Okay. I had a power outage, which was crazy. I rarely have those.
Jeff,
Killed my internet and everything.
can you reorientate yourself so you're vertical and not horizontal? Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, it was you that got crooked somehow. I don't know how that happened.
Blame it on technology.
So I just had a power outage. I don't know what happened. Sorry about that.
No worries.
And I was trying to go watch it happen in real time on TV, but I missed.
Oh.
I'll go watch later. All right, so we're back. Nice to see you.
Yeah.
Sorry for interrupting the flow of the conversation.
No, not at all. I got to answer a couple of questions. As I mentioned to you last week, we had a guest who was a boom operator and talked about, I talked about silent movies and how, when we had talking movies, some of the actors or actresses' voices didn't quite match up with the way they looked, and that was a big catastrophe for the actors. So,
Well, you
that Liberty Mutual ad that I did.
Yeah.
You see that with the actor? I thought it was interesting that they selected me for that job because the audition wasn't like what they had me do. But when I listen back and pay attention, they really did capture that the texture of our voices matched pretty well.
Oh, yeah? Oh.
So that casting started to make a little more sense. Here, let me turn this.
So you meant that so you did a voiceover, an overdub on the actors speaking?
Yeah, that was sort of the joke, is that I was going to be the overdub voice for the actor.
I see.
That couldn't get the line right in the Liberty Mutual ad where the guy's making all the mistakes. I'm the guy who says it correctly. But in the casting department, they must have caught that our voices have a similarity, even though I'm much sort of deeper. Texturally, we're very similar, so it kind of worked for the joke. So I thought that was an interesting catch.
Is that in your commercial reel? I haven't showed the commercial reel yet.
No, it's
okay.
It's on YouTube somewhere. I think everyone's probably seen it to death in America, from what I can tell. I don't watch a lot of TV, but everyone's like, dude, we're sick of seeing it.
So you were talking about your night mix segment on WTMX Chicago and how you had to be a psychoanalyst and buddy and all that.
Well, that one was really, that wasn't as much of that as it was trying to get people to tell more of their story. It was a request and dedication show, so people would call up anticipating, can you play song X for Terry in, in Chicago, whatever. And then you would have to try and extract something more interesting out of them. They didn't really want to tell their story, they didn't want to spill all the beans. So that was kind of the difficult part, was that I would have to sort of extract a story, and then I would have to quickly go back and edit myself out of the story using razor blades and tape, chop that all up, and then get it on the air. So that was kind of it was an interesting, it was when I learned to interview my audience versus, I never really had a lot of on-air interviews with artists and stuff, but I did learn to interview like the regular people in my audience and get
how do you get
to
them
the heart of everything.
How do you get them to trust you when they know they're on radio?
I think that was the hard part with the show. And I think you just sort of have to break through a little bit and be genuinely curious about people. And you'll be surprised how much they'll tell you. Yeah, I think it's just and I am, first of all, I think that a lot of people think what I do is very interesting. Since I was 18 and a half, I've been sitting in padded rooms talking to myself for a living. That's the truth. So it seems glamorous and interesting, but it's a singular experience in a lot of ways. Now, you met me at a very interesting time in my life when I had this whole crazy studio in Nashville thing going on. So, and part of that was because I spent my whole life locked in little rooms and fishbowls and radio stations and stuff, and I just wanted to be more engaged in the world, and out in the world more. So that was an interesting experiment, but, for the most part, this is what I do. So I'm genuinely curious about how other people make money. Like anyone who called me and like, how do you make a living? What are you doing right now? I'm so curious about that. Every kind of job. Like Mike Rowe had that show Dirty Jobs. Fascinated with that kind of stuff. So I would just interview people on the request line all the time just about what they're doing for a living. I think that's interesting.
So you talked about being in a padded room. What was the smallest room you've ever had to work in?
When I first started my voiceover career, I moved to Phoenix, Arizona, and I had kind of one of these open plan houses, and I really needed some isolation. And I jokingly said one day, it'd be neat if I could find a little British phone booth or something like that to put in. Damn if I didn't find one. Not long after that, they sort of were a novelty item or something out there, but I found one, and I put it in my studio and put foam in it and stuff.
Wow.
And I used that for a while, and it was tiny. My back was against one wall, my knees were against another, and it worked. I mean, it was better than not having isolation, but I was really glad to build a room and get out of that thing.
Yeah.
So that was the ugliest. But a lot of closets, you just end up, mostly working in closets when you're doing voiceover. When you're adapting your house.
Yeah.
I built a couple of spaces out, and I had that amazing studio in Nashville. That was the most fun. But mostly you're trying to adapt a closet or a small room like that.
So when you're radio DJing, did you work with an engineer, or did you have to do everything yourself?
During my career, I never had a producer. I had the Chicago show, I had a producer that helped with the phone calls.
Okay.
Kevin would sort of sort through the phone calls. So Chicago is like a city of 3 million people or something, and we would open up 10 phone lines and broadcast the phone number.
Wow.
And they would just light up just endlessly, bam, 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 all night, and we're just taking calls as fast as we could.
Yeah.
And then, so he's screening the calls in one room, telling me, what line to go to. And then I would tape the call, get the information, edit the call, broadcast. And this whole time I'm playing the CDs, everything. I was in the control room alone. So yeah, my whole radio career, I did all of it by myself.
Wow. Yeah.
You get in the flow of it, and you have a lot to do, and everything's kind of within reach. And then the power goes out and stuff like that. You always have something go wrong, So you kind of get adapted to it. Kind of the way it's a lot like being a musician, where you can't believe that your hands can be this busy while your mouth is doing this, And it takes some practice. I'm working on some stuff now. I'm trying to get some finger picking while I'm singing, and that's just really hard to disconnect those parts of your brain and body.
Absolutely.
But,
do you think you still have a following from your DJ days? Do they still come up to you or send you messages and say, "Hey, Jeff, we missed you"?
With Facebook, a lot of people connect with me, from various cities I've worked in that I don't necessarily know, but I can see that we have people in common. Or, I spent 9 years in Milwaukee doing the afternoon show on top station. So I assume if they're from Milwaukee, they kind of know who I am, or we're sort of connected somehow, But it's really a mysterious thing, because you really have no idea how many people or who you impact or how you impact them, because you don't get feedback. When you're playing to and I see these comedians trying to work from home now, struggling with not getting that instant feedback when they do a joke. That was one of the toughest things to learn in radio, is to just do a joke and just let it hang in the air and just okay, that's cold-blooded, you know what I mean? That's hard.
Yeah.
So you have to adapt to that. So I really, now we have a mutual friend who introduced us, Shannon, and it was fascinating to meet her and learn that I had an impact on her life when she was a teenager.
I met you before we visited you. Because you were doing bit straps at NAMM, and that's how I met you.
You guys came in together. That's what I remember, is that you guys came in together once. So Shannon, Shannon told me about the impact I had on her, which I rarely get that story that someone listened to me on the radio. I just don't hear those stories. So it was interesting because when she was a teenager, she listened to, and that's the time when you really connect to music and stuff.
Yeah.
So it was fascinating to learn that she had developed that kind of connection with the disc jockey. That when I was a kid, we didn't have radio stations in my towns, so I didn't have that kind of connection with anyone on the radio. So I've never had that kind of radio experience until I got on the radio. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I have a question here from, I thought I saw it just a minute ago. Hold on a second. Where did it go? Sam again, he wanted to know if you've ever had to handle stalkers. Question from Australia.
Yeah, stalkers is a weird thing. There are some people. I think that female disc jockeys have more what you would call stalkers. I had some fans that were maybe a little off the rocker, a little unusual. I had a cat that called me every day for years. He called me at 4:00 every afternoon, and he claimed he was in the jungle room, and he was some sort of relative of Elvis and stuff. And we had great chats. I enjoyed talking to Mikey every day. Hey, Mikey, I knew it was him every day. So, but I never had anything like threatening, but I would have sort of like these nutty fans who were just a little bit over the edge, and they would show up. Okay, so one guy kind of had a robotic voice, and he would call me all the time, and we would talk. I think his name was Eric, and we would talk all the time. And they're just little brief conversations. One day he calls me, and I said, "Hey, Eric, what's going on?" He says, "I'm in the lobby." And I turn around, and across the glass, he's calling me from the lobby phone. And it's like, dude, that's too close. You're freaking me out. But he was harmless and sweet kid. But, it was just like, that's the kind of stuff you get. Or you would have, for us rock and roll jocks, it would be the crazy rock and roll cats that would show up at every appearance and, remote and concert and event or whatever. You'd have the same kind of crazy rowdies and stuff. But nothing ever threatening, at least.
With your night mix segment, did you ever have to solve relationship problems? The guy and the gal on this, having them on the during your spot, talking it out type of thing?
No, luckily I never did. I never had to do that. That sounds a little more involved than I think I could have handled at that point with a 2-track piece of tape. I just don't think I could have worked that. I didn't do anything live in terms of putting phone calls on live. Mm-hmm. We just rolled tape on everything.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad, because I just think that would have been potential disaster.
So I have a Bill Lynch from Pennsylvania. He said, Jeff reminds me of Pierre Robert from Philly radio. Jeff, have you heard of him? I don't know.
I don't know that name, but I think that radio people have a tendency to have some similarities.
Yeah. Did you, at radio school, did they ever talk about rhythm? How to imbue a rhythm in your voice? Or
the radio school I took was a very simple kind of short, like a few months, couple nights a week course on just the real basics of radio.
Yeah.
The guy who ran the radio station did this. It's kind of a way to develop some talent, so he would have some people to put in to work. And I was kind of instantly drawn to it, and obviously cut out for it. So
you were made for radio.
I was made for radio, and the interesting part of it is that in my mind I've always been a musician, and I've always been more of a musician than I am a performer and a player. I'm not a great musician, but I'm made of musical stuff, if that makes sense. So I think that having rhythm and playing music and playing guitar and singing every day and all that stuff, it is all very much in the gears of it.
Mm-hmm.
And, my ability to hit the post on music is because I know when the singer's going to start instinctively.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I'm a singer and because I pay attention to that.
Yeah.
And I think that it's a way bigger factor in voiceover, especially.
Yeah.
Because you have to, the difference in voiceover is take your song and all the lyrics that you spread out over 3 minutes and condense it all into 30 seconds. Not the music, make the music the same, just make a 30-second cut. But take all those words and shove them in. That's what voiceover is like. So you still have to have this sort of rhythmic feel to it, but you just have to jam it in a lot faster,
I'd like to take a look at Jeff's commercial reel, but before we do that, I have a couple of questions from Mike Flavin, who is from Phoenixville, Pennsylvania. I think that's where Mike is from. And he said, the first question is, interesting that Jeff didn't take calls live. I thought that was the norm. So Jeff, do you then take the calls separately, pre-broadcast, splice them into your narration, your commentary, and then air it? So you produce it ahead of time?
The way it worked then, and I think that some of these kind of shows did live calls, but this would have been 1990 when I started that job. And we had a 2-track reel-to-reel deck right behind me. So I had the control room and all the CDs and commercials and everything I had to run. And then the phone bank that was attached to the mic, so I could just talk into the mic. And then the calls would go straight to tape. So you believe me, not every call you wanted to put on the radio. Most calls were terrible. Most calls were just like, can you play a song? Just like really boring.
Yeah.
So that's where the skill came in of sort of extracting something interesting out of these people and then cutting it down. So it would go straight to tape. Then I would figure out maybe a good song that would work for. And in that situation, back then we played commercials off of carts, which were like 8 tracks, but it was a 2-track tape, but it looped back around. Like a cartridge, exactly. But the 8-track had the little spindle in it. The carts and radio didn't. The spindle was in the machine, so that would the pinch roller would slam into place and start, and then they would have a tone that they would re-cue, so it'd be back to the beginning. So the tape machine went straight to a record cart machine. So I would get a phone call, edit it down, dump it off onto a cart, label it, and have that ready to air over, like out of a commercial break or over a song somewhere, and then jump to the next one and edit that down and dump it off. So the calls were usually like within the hour or so of getting the call, but to try and do it live would have just been disastrously dull. Just dull would be the worst part of it, really.
I get you. Thank you. So let's look at Jeff's commercial reel, because Mike Flavin from Phoenixville, Pennsylvania, has a question about his voiceover work. So let's look at the commercial reel first. Here we are.
The city of brotherly love, birthplace of underdogs, but you can never count us out. We've had an unbelievable season. Now to celebrate, you can get a great deal on Ford F-Series, the best-selling trucks in America for 41 straight years.
Taste like the cool moonlight can illuminate and shine. Taste like a good jam session can resonate and define. We believe in going our own way, no matter which way the rest of the world is going. We believe we can see farther
only because we are standing on the shoulders of giants. We believe in muscle. Muscle milk, muscle memory, and muscle cars. Okay, so you're looking to get a new truck. You need some power to haul your stuff. Well, I got your truck right here. Ford Ranger, 280 foot-pounds of torque, 154 horsepower, 4x4, 4x2, even 4 doors if you need them.
Fantastic. Yeah, I do. It is obvious that there are changes in pace from one to the next, and even the way you express your personality. But yeah, which is quite impressive that you have to be in that mindset for that particular commercial to create a different mindset for that commercial.
But you see how you don't want this face being in every one of those images? I mean, come on.
So
you want a different face in each commercial, really.
Or you just need to change your shirt and that will do.
Obviously, if you've seen my videos, I refuse to change my shirt. It's just I'm gonna wear tank tops. It's Florida. It's how it's gonna be.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it is your prerogative to wear your tank tops. So Mike Flavin had a question. Has Jeff ever had to dub for an actor in real life, like in the Liberty Mutual spot?
No, I haven't actually done that. I think that's an interesting thing. What I find, I get a lot of those kind of auditions coming in, but the older I've gotten, the more sort of lower resonance I have in my voice, and sort of the less I can play around with the high notes. I can still sing the high notes, but to be sort of natural as a voiceover, you can hear there's a lot of that low rumble, even when I'm trying to hit the high notes. So I'm not really good at mimicking, and there are very few people who sort of live in my world down here, So I don't get a lot of that.
So I have Mike Brunt my friend from Eugene, Oregon. He said, "Blimey, what a voice."
Arr, matey. I'm glad you like it.
He loves your voice. Mike Flavin again says, I have to say I've seen those spots, the one from your commercial reel, and Jeff doesn't look like the guy I thought was doing it.
See, exactly. I wish I could see the guy in your mind, because that is so interesting to me. The sort of the person, because one time a lady came up to me at an event, and she gave me that cross-eyed look that they give you, when they're like trying to put your face to your voice. That's really what their brain's doing. They can't process that. And she said to me, I was like in the last pictures in that reel I sent you when I had the full beard. I didn't have long hair, but I had plenty of hair. She said, I thought you'd be hairier. And I thought, that's a great. I'm like, what do you mean, like shoulders and arms or what? But she just had an image of more like a bear-like, bigger guy. I'm 6'1". I'm not insignificant person. Yeah. But in her mind, I was just a very big bear-like creature,
That is so funny.
Bare necessities, the simple bare necessities. So I think I think that's the beautiful thing that's missing with that internet ruins now, is that before everyone got to have their own guy. You got to have your own guy. And now it's ruined. You got to know the guy. Because everyone got to have someone that they thought was appropriate or attractive for the role of that voice. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If that makes sense? Like, I'd rather you think that I look like my voice sounds than ruin the fantasy of the voice. That's, you know what I mean? That's the thing I'd say.
Wow. Yeah. So Sam from Sydney, Australia, do you get many offers to work in video games?
I audition for video games, but I haven't made the cut in any video games, and I'm not sure why. There's no, the thing about auditioning is you do it, you send it, and you forget about it, and you have no way of knowing why you're not chosen for it.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I am concerned that those sessions are kind of brutal because they always have you shouting and punching and all this stuff,
Yeah.
and I'm like, do I really want to spend 4 hours shouting and being punched, because that's hard on old bodies doing that kind of stuff, You're not actually being punched, but making those noises, that hurts.
Yeah. So do you think you're engaged based on your personality then, your voice personality, I guess?
I think that's an interesting thing. I think that it's changing a little bit just because the demands of the marketplace are changing. They want a little more natural stuff. And I think that I've had a great living doing this spark and growl thing that I do, this really loud, hard sell stuff that I do. That's not as in vogue right now. But I think that it's the same thing as you creating your own visual for me. That, like, when Ford wants me to be more aggressive, they say, be more trucky.
Oh, really?
So they don't think of me as being a guy. They think of me as being a truck. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Like, I'm the voice of the truck. I'm the motor of the machine. That kind of thing. So I'm animating the vehicles, I feel like. So I think, there is definitely some personality aspects to that.
So, earlier on you mentioned anthropomorphizing an item. So I guess you are, in a way, you are imbuing personality in a truck.
In an inanimate object.
life.
I think that's kind of the job of the voiceover, or in a video game or animation or something like that, as you are imbuing that inanimate object with a life force.
Yes. Wonderful.
And I think that I have a very motor-like voice, so that's a good fit,
Have you done a humorous commercial then? Something where you had to sound like there was laughter in your voice?
Yeah, I do that. I do those kind of auditions all the time. I don't have anything offhand that I can think of that I did that aired recently, but I do audition for that sort of stuff, and I enjoy doing that. It's more fun to try and do that. I've done all this blah blah barking stuff forever and ever, so it is more fun to try and bring humor or play with a script a little bit,
So Mike from Phoenixville, he says, I pictured a guy looking like John Wayne. I think this was in reference to a bit in your commercial reel.
No, I think that's kind of a guy that I picture too, like a stocky, sort of maybe like a flat top Marine kind of guy, like no BS kind of guy. Yeah, I think that is kind of how I picture my voice too.
Well, Sam from Sydney, Australia says you sound like Optimus Prime. In Transformers.
Nice. I actually have online on my SoundCloud somewhere, I have me doing Optimus Prime voice, and I think we put an effect on it, maybe some harmonizer or something, but somewhere on SoundCloud is me doing Optimus Prime.
Wow. So, of course, Mike Flavin says Jeff needs to be in the next Cars Disney movie.
You're preaching to the choir. Call Disney.
So Jeff has an interesting trick that he uses in his voiceover, and that's a metronome. I'm going to play his little video clip on using a metronome.
Cool.
I think that's great to share so that our viewers get to understand that there is more than just reading. There is a lot of work involved
And
in
this
preparing.
kind of makes the music connection between voiceover too. It's a small part of it, but voiceover is a very musical pursuit physically. You know what I'm saying? Like the same sort of things you have to do to play music and sing, you have to do in voiceover, and this is part of that.
It's interesting
Cool.
that you do this because when we had Dean Parks, a guitarist on, you know Dean Parks, he used to work with Steely Dan and Eric Clapton and guys. When I asked him what is the one trick or tip that you feel has been the most crucial or important part of your work, and he said metronome, using a metronome to feel the rhythm, to get used to having a pace, and so on and so forth.
I really learned a lot about the metronome in Nashville because those guys use the metronome in a fascinating way, where sometimes I feel like the metronome is chasing me. These guys just like make it play to them. It's amazing how when you really find the space in the metronome, it opens up and it's not chasing you so hard. And so the cats in Nashville really taught me to appreciate the metronome, and it helped lead to this video.
Let's watch the video then.
So in a lot of my sessions, I'm working to video frames instead of just time. So I end up trying to beat the clock in sort of strange ways.
Roll and take 9.
This is your month. Ford Truck Month. Get F-150 with $14,639 total value plus $750 Ford credit bonus cash plus $500 on top of your trade.
Like 7 for
Loads of time.
I got that whole music bed?
No. You were at 6 and a quarter, so you got about a half second.
A half second is not loads of time.
I was being sarcastic.
Time in the world.
Kill me. Okay. So after you play Beat the Clock for a little while, it'll take me a minute to realize that I've reset my body tempo from reading either disclaimers or having to fit things into a small amount of time. And I'll get out a metronome, usually the one on my phone, and I'll try to get my tempo from being like this to being more appropriate for the read.
So that was quite informative, which leads me to my next question. So if there are no questions on the use of the metronome from our viewers, I do see one on microphones, but I wanted to ask Jeff, besides the metronome, anything in your studio equipment-wise that has changed since, let's say, the 90s? I know a lot has changed. We've gone digital
Everything.
and so on and so forth.
You know, when I started my voiceover business in 1997, really officially kicked off like the very first of 98. And at that point, I was using a reel-to-reel to send out daily stuff. And what else? I think just reel-to-reel. And then I got a DAT machine. So I was doing reels, like cutting stuff straight to reel, straight to DAT, racing to FedEx, and sending it out overnight so that the radio station could have it the next day.
Yeah.
And that's how the first couple of years that I was in the business, that's how we did it. And then eventually, what happened? MP3s came along and we were able to, you know, send a reasonable quality MP3. But up until then, it was just tapes and FedEx racing to the airport at 9 o'clock to beat the planes and stuff.
Wow.
Yeah, that's how. So really, what I say to people now, you know, like I have a really elaborate studio because I'm a musician and stuff, and I have filled with self-loathing, I guess is the real reason. But I tell people now that to do my job, I have had to forget more technology than is required to do this job today. Over the course of my life, I've had to forget all this analog stuff, all the early digital stuff, and all the different, my first computer was a XT.
Ooh.
Yeah, do you even know what that is? That's just like barely a computer. The first audio computer I bought had a giant hard drive. It was amazing. Couldn't believe I could get 2 whole gigs of hard drive. Yeah, 2 gig hard drive, and it was giant back then. And that thing cost me like $2,500. It was terrible. So, yeah, it's a lot easier, and a lot more people are in the business today because it is easier and cheaper. And there's like consumer level, products that people can get
Of course.
that aren't, I mean, even say 30 years ago, having a home studio cost prohibitive completely. Analog home studio, forget it. Just couldn't do it. My first home studio was a 4-track cassette deck.
Wow. Yeah. Wow.
Actually, probably my first home studio was a two cassette boombox, because that's what I would make my air check tapes. And I got that job in Dallas making a tape off that little boombox.
Wow.
Whatever studio you got to work with.
Yeah, of course. So it makes you a very resourceful person then, in a way.
Well, I think that when you're into audio and studio and all that stuff, you look for anything, any advantage, any way you can make noise, any tricks. Always looking over somebody's shoulder, how they're mixing things. And now you got YouTube now, and I love YouTube because you can learn so much. But I didn't grow up with that sort of stuff, and I didn't get to go to audio school or any of that stuff. So I just asked a lot of questions, and when engineers were working on the studio and the broadcast booth and stuff, I'll just ask questions and watch, learn how things work. So
So
I can do it.
Bill Lynch from Pennsylvania, he says, is microphone selection super important to Jeff, or any mic will do?
I have a preference. I use a U87 for voiceover.
Wow.
And
that's a good microphone.
Now, right here, you can't see it, but right here I've got the Sennheiser 416, which is what is kind of the industry standard, theoretically now. But I don't like it personally. And part of it, it's a directional mic. A lot of the sound from my body comes off of my body. It's not just projecting out of my mouth. So like a lot of this resonance that you're hearing, boom, boom, all this boominess, that's coming off of my chest. And the large diaphragm kind of gets the vibe. And I can turn and move. With the directional mic, it loses track of me when I move. And I move a lot to generate the sound. So I feel like even though the sound quality is kind of similar, it's harder mic to work for my body. So I like the large diaphragm. Now, what I really like for singing is the large diaphragm tube mic. It's just a little more grease, for singing.
Got it. So Mike Flavin from Pennsylvania as well, he says, can one of us regular folks increase the depth of our voice then? Because his is very thin.
I'll tell you how to do it. I got a trick. I'm going to do a video on this pretty soon, and I'll show you how to do this. But I think the simple explanation is this. Tweeter, woofer. What you want to do is get the sound to resonate in your woofer. Okay? So I think what most people do, I think it's called... I have to think of the terminology, but your voice, it's upper larynx and lower larynx. A lot of us generate our voice from our upper larynx and into our head voice. Mm-hmm. And it's resonating in this sort of small chamber inside your head, like a tweeter. So what you want to do is teach your body to resonate down here so that you're bypassing your nasal cavity. So I'll tell you the story. When I lived in Milwaukee, I noticed everyone sort of had a nasally accent. And I have no evidence to support this, but I thought it's probably because their nose is stopped up all year long because it's so damn cold. So you kind of got used to it, you kind of got your nose stopped up, so you sort of talk like that, So I thought, I'm going to learn to talk without using my nasal passage in case I get a cold in the winter. I'll still sound like a beast on the radio. So what I started doing is if you pinch your nose right at the base of the bone, you can feel with your fingers whenever air escapes. I can't even make air escape through my nose now because I'm so practiced at it. But you will feel the air hit your fingers so pinch your nose, not entirely, leave a little bit so that a little bit of air can pass through, but not come in. And then you have to get your body past the thinking it's going to drown panic stage. But once you learn to do that, you'll see that you'll hear a huge difference when you first pinch off your voice, and then pretty soon you'll drop it down into your chest, and you really won't hear the difference because you're not engaging your nasal passage as much when you speak. Wow. So that's the trick that I used, and obviously I have a giant voice to begin with, but the way that it resonates, I used to, what vocal fry is? It's that sort of back of your throat crackly sound that sort of sounds like a deep voice. Yeah. But it's sort of a fake deep voice. Yeah. This will take you past that. And I used to generate a lot of that deep sound that way. But the more I did this, the more it relaxed and dropped my voice down into my chest. And you can tell that I have the ability to even just really drop it down and make it resonate fully in my chest. Wow. And that's just practicing. That's the biofeedback of your fingers teaches you to just ignore your nasal passage and not panic and not think you're going to drown. So that's kind of, and I really believe this works for both sexes, and I would like you to try it and see if it works for you too. Because I'll do a video on this. I'm going to have that come out pretty soon. This is like my best trick in the world.
Well, Mike says thanks. That's amazing. He says his
report back. I want to hear.
Yeah.
That.
There you go, Mike. You have to report back. So, have you been called upon to do accents? Right then, we want a particular accent for this commercial or this voiceover.
Yeah, some last year I had to do sort of like a. How shall I politically correctly say, like a southerner maybe, like a rural person sort of kind of voice. Mm-hmm. But I think that a lot of the accent work, it's kind of a weird thing because if it's a silly accent, I think it's okay for all of us to try for it. Mm-hmm. But I think if it's actually a regional or an ethnic accent, that they're going more toward actual regional or ethnic choices on that, because they're available. Yeah. 30 years ago, when somebody had a spot that needed a crazy voice, you just made up a crazy voice on the spot and you did it, and you cut the thing because you were the only guy making commercials. So you did all the voices. But now, with the availability worldwide, it's more democratized. And I think it makes more sense for an advertiser, if you're doing a serious spot, to have the correct ethnicity or region for that message, which it's also a bummer because I like doing silly voices and I like getting paid. But, what are you going to do?
So how do you make yourself first call then?
I think that's an interesting question. If I had the answer to that, I would get every gig.
Have you had to reject gigs? Have you looked at one and said, nah, I don't want to do that?
Couple times there's some products I don't want to get behind,
Yeah.
And I think that the double-edged sword of self-promoting on the internet, you become sort of more famous and people are going to recognize you.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I booked a gig. This has been a half dozen years ago or something. I booked a gig somewhere and it seemed like a normal gig. But then when we did the commercial session, it sounded more like conspiracy theory stuff, It's like, kind of eye-rolly stuff. And then somebody I know heard it, and I'm just like, oh, man. I didn't know it was going to be that when I took the job, So that stuff can kind of come back to haunt you. And now an interesting phenomenon in the voiceover business is that when they book you, people are looking at your social media footprint to see if you are going to help or harm their product. So you do have to be cautious about how you behave in public, which was always a factor being on the radio. I knew if I got thrown in jail, it was front page news, So you have to be more clever. So, so everyone is a disc jockey now. Everyone has to worry about their, what they say in public and whether or not it's going to bite them in the future.
So do you usually get to audition the material first, before you accept a job? Do you say, can I please have an idea of what the product is and what the script might look like?
Pretty much now, unless it's people that I've known for a long time and worked with a long time, pretty much everything comes via an audition. So you are getting virtually the script that you're auditioning for, in advance. So that's what most of it is now. I've been working with Ford for a long time. It'll be 20 years at the first of the year. And so whatever they send me, I just plan on just being the Ford truck guy, But it's not always that Ford truck guy. Sometimes it's the really excited, loud Ford truck guy. Either way, and I've got that muscle in me somewhere, so that I don't worry about. And I don't get too nervous about those, but stuff that, like new stuff, I don't really know what it's going to be. I might get a little nervous about it in anticipation of what it's going to require, And everybody works a little bit differently, which is kind of interesting. So you get accustomed to a certain flow of work with your regular clients, and then someone new comes along and they just have a different workflow. And it's an interesting thing to adapt to, Okay. Kind of like the way if you were going to different venues, like every house has a different guy and you kind of have to adapt to the room a little bit. It's kind of the same thing.
Speaking of venues, have you ever been called to MC an event?
Well, when I was in radio, I did that all the time. I mean,
of course.
Yeah, it was a pretty regular thing. I don't, there are voiceover people that do live events and that get those kind of bookings. I don't really offer myself up for that. It hasn't occurred to me to do that. I really like pre-recording. I did live radio every day, 6 days a week for 18 years. And the stress of going live, I'm just like, that's intense. You're doing it right now. And you think about it, So I would think about it doing an afternoon show. I didn't go on till 3, so I had all day to sit in my own stew and think about it, and then go on. So I think that I got exhausted from that performance anxiety. And once I got done with that, I didn't really want to go back into it. And also, you know, I like just being sort of a shaggy rock and roller. So, you know, I don't want to put on tuxedos and go in public and stuff. Are you kidding me?
Gotcha.
It's not me.
Gotcha.
But I can do it. I mean, I can knock it out of the park. I have experience at that. And just, I'd rather do a rock and roll show. You know?
I hear you. So, Jeff, we've taken more than an hour of your time. I'm going to scroll through to see if there are any more questions. If not, we should let you go to sleep because
it's been really fun hanging out with you. I'm glad that we talked last night, so I got practice staying up.
Thank you so much. Any more questions, anybody? I'm going to wait for a few seconds because there is a latency, just in case there are questions coming in, but it looks highly unlikely. We have
really
had
fun hanging with you guys.
We've had a captive audience. I didn't pull in all the questions or comments because we had such a fun time talking to you. So let's see if there are any more. 1 second.
If there's any more, I'm awake now. I might as well stay up and talk.
3, any more? Oh no, Bill Lynch wants to know, ever do an audio book?
Oh, here's the thing about me, Bill. I have the attention span of a gnat. And the idea of sitting in my booth through an entire book is just beyond my imagination. I tried to read a 12-page pamphlet once, and I just couldn't do it. It's too long. It's too much reading. I am a true radio guy. I really have about a 45-second attention span. I can get through a 60-second, but I'm touch and go in that last 15, you know, whether I'm going to stay.
Gotcha.
So, yeah, I don't really, reading books is hard just for fun even because my mind just starts so much. So,
yeah.
No, I know a lot of people do very well at that and make a lot of money and stuff, but these guys spend like 8 straight in the booth and I'm just not like that. Not at all like that.
I understand. Well, I think we're at the end of our questions. We have so many people thanking you. Mike says, thanks,
oh, that's cool.
Jeff.
So fun.
Bill said, thanks, Jeff. Everyone else
Thanks,
loves
Mike.
your
Thanks,
voice.
Bill. Thank you.
Awesome
If you have
voice.
jobs for me, I'm available.
Of course. Did you all hear that? He's available for your jobs. Okay.
Oh, that's funny.
Well,
so
thanks.
fun hanging with you.
Likewise,
Thank you guys.
Jeff.
Thank all of you guys.
Yes, thanks, Jeff. I'm glad we got to hang as well yesterday and today.
Very fun. Keep in touch.
Yeah, I will. You are awesome. There's a little awesome animated GIF now flashing. Jeff Bell, the awesome
cool.
guy. Okay, thanks.
Nice.
Thanks,
I
Jeff.
can't wait to go watch this tomorrow.
All right, I'll hang up on Skype right now, and you have a good evening.
Good, because I don't know how to hang up this thing.
I will hang it. I will hang up.
Learn this.
I will do the hanging up. So don't
I'm
worry.
having a boomer moment. Sorry.
Don't worry. Well, you have a good night, and I'll catch
You
you
too.
later.
Thank you.
Okay,
All
take
right.
care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, that was Jeff Bell, an awesome guy, just like all the other guests. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, please subscribe. Thanks very much. And thanks everyone for being here today. So my guest for next week, in case you're wondering, is Chris Curell, who worked with Quincy Jones on Michael Jackson's Bad album. He worked, I should say, the synclavier. Someone asked about the synclavier 2 or 3 streams ago. Well, here is someone who can talk about working the synclavier. He also played on the Bad tour. He was the band, member of the band. For the Bad tour, and as far as I remember, the History tour as well. He played synclavier and synth guitar and sound effects, quote unquote. Chris Curell leads quite a different life with his music these days, so it'd be interesting to chat with him. I got a lot of questions ready, but if you could please bring yours as well. Come and make our guest feel welcome, and please spread the word of the stream so we can have a bigger party and have more party fun. Even though virtually, but at least I get to see you all and I get to interact with you guys. So pass the stream along, please. So if there are no questions about today's stream, anything I did today, no, then please take care of yourselves. And I will see you next week. You guys have been awesome as well. And thank you for being here. Have a great week ahead, and I'll see you next week. Don't forget, pass along the stream. Bye.